Hello and welcome to episode 153 of My Circus, My Monkeys. Most of you are about halfway through the spring term, so smack dab in the middle of midterms. Whether you're listening to this during midterms or during some other crazy part of the year for you and your team, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed when everything seems to hit at once. When that happens, you're left wondering, how am I supposed to get everything done? Well, today, I'm going to discuss how to better navigate those overwhelming and stressful times. And I'm going to focus on things that you can do right now while you're in the weeds instead of big picture strategies. Because let's face it, you don't got time or energy to strategize right now. So keep listening. Okie dokie, let's dive in. First, I just want to thank you for listening to this episode because I know you're probably feeling like you should be working on something else instead. And I want to stop for a minute and identify that this impulse is the stress response, aka fight or flight, aka fight, flight, freeze, appease. Your brain believes you are in danger, so it wants you to do the things it believes will get you out of danger. The problem is, you're not actually in danger, and your brain is most likely basing the best things to do on faulty information. Now, we've discussed this before in episodes on stress and our stories/beliefs. So we need to start by being very clear with ourselves and our brains. If you felt called to listen to this episode, you need to understand that there is no way to accomplish everything on your to-do list right now. It's literally impossible. Quite frankly, it was impossible before this crazy busy time, but it's even more impossible now. I tell you this not to bum you out, but to empower you. And maybe you're like, oh no, I'm definitely bummed out, Anne. Fair enough. Let me explain a bit more. Almost all of you listening are being asked to do superhuman amounts of work. Your to-do lists are ridiculous. This do more with less mentality that's been going on in higher ed for at least the last decade has absolutely caught up with everyone. I mean, how many people's jobs are you actually doing right now? Probably more than you even know, because so many people have absorbed so many other people's roles, and then they leave, someone else gets hired, thinking, oh, this is just one job, but then they start getting more and more things added to their plates. And the worst part is, most of us look at our to-do list, whether it's written down or just floating around in our heads, and we blame ourselves for not being up to the challenge of doing superhuman work. I had a coaching call with someone from the Spring Institute last week, and they mentioned having imposter syndrome. So part of our discussion was about how almost everyone in higher ed feels that imposter syndrome right now because we're human beings, not fictional superheroes. And quite frankly, there's so many superhero movies these days that sometimes we feel like we should be able to leap buildings in a single bound. But again, that is ridiculous. Stop thinking you can do your to-do list, especially given that some of your most important to-dos probably aren't even on there, like addressing the concerns of your team or students as they come up, effectively supervising your team, or being strategic so you can plan ahead and address issues from habits, policies, and procedures. I've said this before, but once you realize this, and I'm talking radical acceptance here, you stop trying to do the impossible and you stop blaming yourself, your team, and even your students when it doesn't happen. There are systemic problems larger than you and your team at play here, and you cannot possibly make up the difference. Stop trying. Free yourself, free your team from this impossible burden. But Anne, my supervisor said, we need to do XYZ and ABC By do re mi. What if I get fired? What if my team gets fired? What if we lose funding? What if the students leave and and the college closes? Yep, that's the stress response again. Your subconscious truly believes all those things are very, very possible, which is why you need to work even harder, right? Now, there's not a zero chance that nothing bad will happen, but your subconscious brain is very dramatic. And let's think about the solution your brain has come up with of working harder. How long have you been trying the work harder system? Is it working? Have you caught up? Are you, your team, and your students all safe from those things at this point? No, right? Let's be honest. Students sometimes aren't ready to do well in college. And no matter how much support they get, they're not going to do well. I have seen so many people get burned out because their job is to reach these students and get them to be successful. But if students don't return texts, emails, or come to class, what are you supposed to do? How many times are you supposed to try? Some students are going to fail or withdraw from your institution no matter how much time and effort you put in. Some institutions have been so mismanaged for so long, or just haven't kept up with the times, and it's just too late to catch up. You and your team exhausting yourselves to keep retention from dropping another 0.1% is not going to change that. If your supervisor has unrealistic expectations, it is really just a matter of time before you and your team burn out or quit because you can't keep up. Working harder does not work. If it did, you would not be listening to this podcast. It just feels like it should be the answer because your subconscious has been fed a bunch of bleep from people, probably well-intended, who also believed that hard work was the answer. You can absolutely work hard on something because you're passionate about it and you care about the people involved. But that's not really what we're talking about here, is it? This is about people using your passion and compassion to get you to try and do superhuman amounts of work to avoid fixing systemic problems. Again, maybe they have good intentions, but one's intentions are not particularly helpful or relevant when you and your team are exhausted, overwhelmed, and burned out. Okay, so I spent more time than I'd really planned trying to convince you that what you're doing right now isn't working and that you need to let go of this idea of being able to complete everything on your to-do list. Not because you personally can't make it work, but because no one can. So let's spend the rest of our time talking about what you can do. Number one, accept reality. Okay, so this is really a summary of my earlier musings, but I wanted it on the list. If a student came to you and said, I want to graduate in 2 years instead of 4, so I'm just going to take a double load every semester. You would A, think that's absolutely ridiculous, and B, explain why there is very little chance that they will be successful long term. But, I mean, shouldn't that be okay under the work harder system? I mean, they're just doing the work of 2 students for 2 years, so they're doing more with less. Do you get it now? Number 2, prioritize. Once you realize you can't do everything, that frees you up to do the most important things. You can base how you prioritize on many different factors, mandates from above, upcoming deadlines, your strategic plan, things like that. In the 4th week of the Supervisor Strengths Institute, we have folks develop their authentic leadership statement based on the things that they do best. And that is a great way to prioritize because when you're in your strength zone, it is the best use of your energy and it's where you're going to be the most productive. So let's get into the details. How many things should you prioritize? 3. No more than 3. Per Jim Collins, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. When you're thinking about your day, your week, your month, and the semester, think in terms of 3. What are your 3 overreaching priorities for the semester? Once you know those, you can use them to prioritize your monthly priority. Use them to prioritize the 3 things that will be your monthly priorities. Oh my goodness. Then from there, each week, what are the 3 things you need to focus on each week to get you to hit your monthly priorities? And then look at your daily. What are the 3 things I need to do today to get me closer to all those goals? Now, this doesn't mean you won't have other things that might come up, but you should be spending most of your time on the things that are priorities. And if those other things prevent you from doing that, you need to invest in better systems. But as I said, right now we're focusing on the reasonable things you can do versus strategic goals like this. And that's because you are stressed and it's just not the right time. So make a note of anything that keeps pulling you away from those priorities so you can address them later in slightly less chaotic times. Okay, number 3, close open loops. So I don't have time to get into a full explanation here, but I vaguely remember doing an episode on this a while back. And either way, check out David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, to get more information. But essentially, an open loop is an unfinished commitment that is taking up valuable real estate in your brain. You feel like you need to do something because you said you would, or because you think you should. But instead of doing that thing so you can close the loop, you put it on a to-do list or just let it keep bouncing around your head. Now, you might not be able to do it because of all the other things on your to-do list, or maybe you're waiting for someone else to finish something so you can do your part, and or it's just not a priority right now. But either way, it's taking up space in your brain and it's using your valuable energy to keep it, quote unquote, alive. And this might happen to you. It might show up like you're focusing on something that is a priority, and suddenly you remember, open loop, how you should probably also do XYZ. And then instead of continuing to focus and get task A done, you're suddenly spreading your energy between your priority and this other open loop issue. Remember, you cannot do everything you've been asked to do or that you'd like to do until you have more resources. So you need to start closing these open loops and putting them on your nope, simply not possible, or revisit in 6 months lists. My own coach suggested I ask myself, if not now, when? In other words, is it important enough to do now? If so, do it now. If not, or if you can't do it now because of other priorities, you need to decide exactly when you will do it. And that means putting it on your calendar now or putting it on the nope list. But do not leave it open, which is spending your valuable energy with giving you absolutely zero rewards. You either do it, plan it, close it because you're not going to do it, at least not anytime soon. You don't want your brain going back to that. All right. And 4, the last thing that we can do. And if you didn't know I was going to talk about this, you haven't listened to enough episodes of My Circus, My Monkeys, but it is stress management. Most of the pressure you feel right now is stress-induced. When you are chronically stressed, you default to your autopilot settings that are usually filled with less effective habits, patterns, and stories that keep you running in circles, like work harder. And since stress is a physiological process, you cannot outthink it. You must rest, and reset your nervous system before you can become effective as a leader or even just a worker bee. I'm not even trying to lead right now. I'm just trying to get something done. You can't do that when you are in fight or flight. And this means you've got to manage that stress, AKA do some self care. But Anne, I don't have time for self care. Remember, I have that big to do list. Yes, we've already discussed this, but because you're in fight or flight, your conscious mind, which would totally understand and appreciate the first part of this episode is not running things right now. Instead, your subconscious mind is controlling your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. If you want to stop freaking out about your to-do list, ironically, you need to stop to doing, step away, and reset your nervous system. Now, I'm not going any deeper here because, as you know, I have done a ton of other episodes on self-care and stress management. But here are just 3 short things that you can do to help your system reset throughout the day. Go for a short walk. And while you're on that walk, pay attention to what you see, feel, smell, etc. Do not keep focusing on what is stressing you out. Do some yoga stretches or chair yoga. And there are plenty of short online videos to show you how if you don't know. Do a short meditation. Again, many, many videos and lots of apps that are available that you can choose the exact time you have. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even 3 minutes. You cannot do it all. So shift your energy into doing what you can. Stop blaming yourself or your team for not being able to do the impossible. It is not fair, and it does not help you be more productive. What will help you be more productive and increase your sense of well-being is accepting the reality that you cannot do it all, prioritize the most important things, close those open loops, and better manage your stress so your nervous system doesn't go into fight or flight as often. And of course, if you do find yourself going into the stress response, step away from your perceived stressor so you can recalibrate. That is what's going to allow you to not only get the most done, but also the most important things done. And until next time, stay strong.